We're just over a month away from the end of the Trump administration, and there are two things we know for certain about this president and his enablers that we should never forget. They tried to end democracy, and they tried to get people sick. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. There's a sense among some Democrats, including apparently President-elect Joe Biden himself, that Republicans will just calm down and become reasonable again after Donald Trump is off the political stage, which is unlikely for two reasons. One, Trump will never willingly leave the stage. If he ever performed at the Apollo, he'd be the first contestant to get into a fist fight with the Sandman. Trump's like someone who draws out the happy birthday song with lots of trills and A's when the rest of the office wants to get back to work and the Carvel cake is like, I'm melting over here. It's basically a guarantee that for the next 4 years, he's going to be tweeting, holding rallies, and calling into Fox News for those 3-hour-long therapy sessions where the Fox and friends look like tourists trapped on a subway car with a guy feeding a dead mouse to his pet cobra. I mean, Brian Kilmeade already looks like he's the only claymation anchor at Fox News, but when he doesn't blink for an hour straight, you'd think he was a lesser-known Gumby character. He's Dumby. And the second reason that Republicans weren't reasonable before Trump, so there's no reasonable to go back to. A decade ago, they were famously showing up to town halls demanding to see Barack Obama's birth certificate and walking around D.C. wearing long coats and tricorn hats like they waited too long to go to Party City before Halloween. I'm a zombie, but from colonial times. Look, it's all they had left, man. And yet Biden seems intent on trying to appeal to Republicans in an attempt to return to a bipartisan normalcy that isn't possible. And even if it was possible, it wasn't working for most people. Biden is reportedly considering picking a Republican to be Commerce Secretary, and on Monday, he told supporters that Republicans would come around and return to normal once Trump is gone.
I predict to you, and I may eat these words, but I predict to you as Donald Trump's shadow fades away, you're going to see an awful lot change.
And I may eat these words, but dude, don't get me wrong. After the last 4 years, it'll be nice to have a president who's optimistic, but sometimes optimism can backfire. Biden's like a football coach in a sports movie. He says to a player, you may be the smallest kid on this team, but you got the biggest heart. Now you go show him what you can do. And then a week later, he's sitting next to the hospital bed saying, Doc told me you broke the leg in 50 places. I didn't even know that was possible. When it comes to the Republican Party, Donald Trump's shadow is not just going to fade away, at least not for a long time. It probably won't even leave the White House. I wouldn't be surprised if even after he leaves, it's still there, wandering around the lawn where he used to scream answer questions over the sound of a helicopter engine. If anything, they should preserve his shadow. His profile's so weird, scientists should study it. Based on this shadow, what do you think happened next? He fell over forward? No, he didn't. It always looked like he was about to. What Trump thinks of them. Even after he lost the election and they were free of the need to do his bidding, still tried to overthrow democracy just to please him. They know he's tapped into the heart of the Republican base, and they live in fear of a primary challenge or a nasty tweet from him.
I think we know from what we've seen with Republicans so far they're going to get on board with this president. There is no evidence to suggest that there are Republicans who want to cross this president, even though he has lost this election. They know he wants to remain in power, out of office, and they're going to do everything they can to show this president loyalty. They're going to do that because they know if they don't, this president will tweet something. Maybe he will back a primary challenger against them. So, no, I don't think there's going to be any division. The choice that Republicans have had to make is either be fully on board with Donald Trump or essentially leave the party.
Yeah, it's like when you were in high school at a party in a friend's basement late at night and everyone started doing whippets. You can't just stand in a corner and hope no one notices you. You either man up and start killing off brain cells or go party with the club. And again, that joke is about chess when I was in high school and not now when it's the hottest sport in the goddamn world. So turned on by chess, I started to refer to it as pornography. Hit me with the crickets, Alex. There it is. Think about how servile and cowardly you have to be to live in fear of a nasty tweet from the world's pettiest, most irritating man. I mean, he's tweeted about me like 20 times, including when he called me bland, weak, awkward, and insecure, and said his show is a cure for insomnia, which is ridiculous. You can't call it a cure yet because we're still in clinical trials. Although early results do suggest that our show is 95% effective at inducing sleep, which is on par with Lunesta. I'm coming for you, Glow Moth! Also, you know why I think Biden is wrong about this? Because he was wrong when he said basically the exact same thing 8 years ago before the 2012 election.
I've said this to you before. What we need is a Republican Party. Yeah. We need leaders that can control the party, and I think you're going to see the fever break.
Not only did the fever not break, it spread. Now we have to get our temperatures checked before we walk into an Applebee's. Biden thought the his fever would break, and instead they elected a guy who gave as many people fevers as he could. And even before that, he just always looked like he had a fever, flush, sweaty. He's basically every side effect at the end of a drug commercial rolled into one person. The point is, this is the Republican Party. Trump's not an anomaly. It was an unhinged authoritarian movement before Trump, and it's not going to change now. I mean, look at what they've been saying even after the courts, and even the Trump-supporting Attorney General repeatedly made it clear there was no evidence of fraud, let alone widespread fraud, that would have changed the outcome of the election.
A large percentage of the American public does not believe the November election results are legitimate.
You think the election was stolen, you tweeted out?
Absolutely. I think there's a great deal of fraud.
As we await today's electoral college decision, an intel source telling me that President Trump did in fact win the election. He says that it is up to the Supreme Court to hear suits from other cases.
From election fraud, chose not to make that proof public, but instead called Maria Bartiromo when it was too late to change the outcome. Or two, one time Maria Bartiromo yelled at the paper boy throwing her copy of the Bad Times in her hedges, and now he prank calls her with hot tips. And you're saying Donald Trump won the election? Yeah, by like a lot. Also, notice how Republicans do this little rhetorical trick where they claim that because their voters think the election was rigged, that means we have to restore faith in our elections.
It is a serious problem when you don't have confidence, when such a high number of Americans don't have confidence in the legitimacy of the election.
Yesterday, I was talking with the constituents back at home, a group of about 30 people. Every single one of them, told me that they felt they had been disenfranchised, that their votes didn't matter, that the election had been rigged. These are normal, reasonable people. These are not crazy people.
If they do think the election is rigged, it's only because you guys keep telling them it's rigged. You're the ones causing this problem. You can't then turn around and say you want to solve it. These guys are like bank robbers stuffing cash in a duffel bag saying, by the way, you should really get some security cameras in here. The Republican Party has spent the last month actively trying to dismantle our democracy. There's no reason to believe they'll suddenly change, and every reason to believe this is who they really are. I mean, the president himself is apparently threatening in private not to leave the White House.
Sources tell CNN that the president has pulled a 180. He used to privately accept the reality that he lost the election, but now, no. He's now starting to believe his own lies that the election was stolen. So much so that Trump has told some advisors that he may not leave the White House on inauguration. Literally saying such a thing, putting words to the sentiment. And one advisor telling CNN, quote, he's throwing an effing temper tantrum. He's going to leave. He's just lashing out.
He's like a kid who refuses to leave the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese. Atticus! Atticus, where are you? Atticus! Sir, adults aren't allowed in the ball pit. I'm looking for my son. Told him we have to leave, but he refuses to accept the results of the ball pit. Atticus! Obviously, Trump won't be allowed to stay in the White House, but the fact that he's even talking about it is insane. I mean, what does he think is going to happen? Biden's going to move in and they're going to have to share a bunk bed like freshman year roommates? Joe? Are you awake, Joe? Joe? What is it, Donnie? Do you think Rudy's a bad lawyer? And even after the Electoral College made it official on Monday, Trump's allies on Fox News are still acting like there's some possibility he could subvert the will of the voters, overturn the election, and remain in office. They can barely even bring themselves to say the words President-elect Joe Biden.
Steve Ducey's son, Peter, who has been on the campaign trail, and now he's with what they're calling the President-elect Biden.
So does it bother you at all that the son of the
What do you mean, according to some? The Electoral College literally just certified it. The highest court in the country has affirmed it twice now. It's not a matter of opinion. Joe Biden is the president-elect. These guys are talking about it like we're all debating the best Billy Joel song. According to some, it's scenes from an Italian restaurant, but I think it's that weird instrumental song that sounds like the music at a grocery store. All jokes aside, the best Billy Joel song is Vienna. Oh, sure, you have your Summer Highland Falls Dead Enders and your She's Got Away heads, but it's Vienna. Hands down, debate over. Again, there's no reason to simply act like the last 4 years didn't happen and people that enabled this monstrous administration will suddenly become reasonable participants in democracy again. In fact, yesterday we found from Blockbuster News reporting that a Trump appointee at the Department of Health and Human Services actively advised the government to let as many people get coronavirus as possible. And while we all basically knew that already from, our eyes and ears, seeing it written down in an email was still shocking.
New emails reported by Politico today show a Trump administration official back in July pushing the widely discredited theory of herd immunity, the idea of purposefully infecting people. Wrote the then science advisor, quote, infants, kids, teens, young people, young adults, middle-aged with no conditions, etc., have zero to little risk, so we them to develop herd. We want them infected and recovered with antibodies. We want them infected. Experts say that would be a disastrous course, though it might explain the refusal of the White House to do more to stop the spread.
We want them infected. That is some real supervillain right there. I mean, Bane might say that, but even he wouldn't put it down in an email. Batman, don't you see we want them infected? CCing Alfred to make sure you get eyes on this. Shoemaker, my Bane's getting better. No thanks to you. Every day I try to run my Bane lines with Shoemaker. Oh, I'm too busy. With what, I ask? Every part of this show that's not you reading jokes off cue cards, he says. Hurting my feelings. How dare you? On our Christmas show, no less. Just think about how monstrous and sociopathic that is. They wanted people to get sick. I know in the Trump era, every story lasts 5 minutes and our brains have all been turned to mush by the constant crush of insanity, but this story should never be forgotten. Anyone who enabled this should be held accountable for it. You can't just let something like this go. If you go through your spouse's things and find a bunch of love letters to an ex saying, I want my husband to die, you don't just toss it in the trash and say, oh, well, water under the bridge. The Trump administration may be coming to an end, but there's no reason to think this era in our politics will end anytime soon. Trump has exposed a deep rot in our political system and within the Republican Party that isn't going to magically disappear. And we can't just forget what happened here. They tried to destroy our democracy, and they stood by as Americans died. Say what you will about the Republican establishment, but at the very least, it's been a closer look. God's Love We Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV, AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses. And they need your help now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. We love you.